While the concept of remote learning is not new, and the technology to allow for remote learning has been available for some time now, the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic created an urgency for the Ontario Ministry of Education to establish formal guidelines for remote learning in K-12 public schools. In this presentation, we will review the policy direction provided by PPM 164, review the current experience of remote learning in the Toronto Catholic District School Board, and provide recommendations on how the challenges presented can be overcome to improve the experience of remote learning in the TCDSB. To begin, it is important to define a few terms. Definitions will assist in creating common understanding of key concepts presented in PPM 164. Remote learning. Learning that occurs when classes are taught at a distance and when students and educators are not in a conventional classroom setting. Remote learning takes place in times of extended interruption to in-person learning. For example, as a result of a pandemic or natural disaster. Classes can be synchronous or asynchronous and can be taught online through a learning management system or LMS or using video conferencing tools. Synchronous learning, learning that happens in real time. Synchronous learning involves using text, video, or voice communication in a way that enables educators and other members of the school or school board-based team to instruct and connect with students in real time. Asynchronous learning, learning that is not delivered in real time. Asynchronous learning may involve students watching pre-recorded video lessons, completing assigned tasks, or contributing to online discussion boards. Virtual learning. This is a term that the TCDSB uses to reference learning that occurs online while attempting to mirror in-person instruction. In reviewing PPM 164, there are remote learning requirements provided. Firstly, minimum requirements for engaging students in remote learning. During remote learning, students and parents must be provided with a daily schedule or timetable that includes 300 minutes of learning opportunities, with a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning activities. Programming must be based on the full Ontario curriculum. Minimum requirements for synchronous learning. During periods of remote learning where students are at home for more than 3 days in a consecutive week, boards must ensure that students are provided with synchronous learning. It is expected that synchronous learning be provided for large and small groups of students each day in a manner similar to in-person classroom teaching. Minimum minutes per day vary based on the grade and are outlined in the PPM. Process for exemption for synchronous learning. School boards must allow for students to be exempted from the minimum requirements for synchronous learning as stated on an individual basis. To support meaningful access to education, alternative learning approaches must be put into place for all exempted students. Exempted students must be provided with a daily schedule or timetable in accordance with the 300-minute instructional day. Protocols for delivering remote learning. The following need to be put into place: a communication process with parents, the use of differentiated instruction and assessment, supports for students with special education needs, and maintain a process for student attendance and safety. Access to remote learning devices such as laptops or tablets and the internet. School boards are expected to provide remote learning devices and internet connectivity to students who do not otherwise have access to them, and develop policies on how these resources will be allocated on an equitable basis. Standardized suite of synchronous learning platforms. School boards must provide teachers with a standardized suite of synchronous learning platforms to ensure that students have a consistent experience and provide teachers with training on these platforms. Finally, cybersecurity, privacy, and online security and safety. School boards must review their cybersecurity and safety policies and develop updated policies related to remote learning. These policies must include clear protocols and procedures for educators to follow so that they can ensure student safety and security during remote learning. These protocols must be clearly communicated to educators, students, and parents. The PPM also includes a series of effective practices. To support students and educators during periods of remote learning, school boards should develop effective practices including providing technical support for remote learning. School boards should provide technical supports to educators, students, and parents for the use of board-provided devices and access to the internet during remote learning. Providing educator training. Educators should have access to subject and division-specific training to support remote learning. The use of standardized platforms. Educators should use board-approved synchronous learning platforms that are fully accessible. Setting out roles and responsibilities. School boards should consider the rights and responsibilities of students, parents, educational assistants, early childhood educators, and other school and board staff during remote learning. Teachers are expected to carry out instructional duties assigned to them by their principals and to comply with all the professional standards and obligations under the Education Act and the Ontario College of Teachers Act 1996. We now shift to looking at virtual learning or online learning from a school board experience at the Toronto Catholic District School Board. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, the TCDSB established a virtual school. The school attempts to mirror in-person learning with 300 minutes of planned synchronous and asynchronous time. Protocols for delivering virtual learning include communication with parents via email, Google Classroom message boards, or telephone, differentiated instruction assessment via virtual tests, uploading assignments, paper and pencil assignments that are scanned, video recording, breakout one-to-one discussions in breakout rooms, working with a small group during asynchronous time. Supporting special needs students has been tricky and has evolved over time, but intensive support programs are not available, only withdrawal support for students for language and math. No EA or CYW supports are available. The virtual school does handle providing devices to those who require it. The number of SCA devices have ballooned over time. Regarding the internet, while parents typically provide internet access, where a parent cannot afford access, the TCDSB can provide a data-enabled device or offers a subsidized internet package with Rogers. Standardized suites of learning platforms include Google Classroom, Brightspace, D2L or Desire to Learn, and Zoom. Regarding cybersecurity, students need to follow the TCDSB's acceptable use policy, and any other documents that are sent need to be password protected and are sent to school passwords and school accounts to ensure that any documents are sent to the correct person. Several challenges have presented themselves at the TCDSB with regards to virtual learning. Parents have a tendency to interfere in lessons and, at times, make inappropriate comments via chat, class stream, or video, audio. For those children who have very high needs, it is often very difficult to meet the needs of these special needs children in a virtual platform. The virtual learning platform does not have the capacity to provide EA or CYW support as would be provided in an in-person school. Parents often take on all of the supports required beyond academic instruction. Sometimes it is observed that parents may be masking student needs by enrolling students in virtual learning. With regards to student attendance, the expectation is that children are attending daily, and absences are reported using the typical TCDSB practice. The challenge is that parents often take more liberties with student attendance. there is a higher frequency of absences from school. The belief is that there are different levels of monitoring due to the fact that there isn't the same level of contact in virtual school as there would be in a physical school, and that parents often take greater liberties to provide more flexibility for them and their work schedules. Lastly, it has also been observed that the longer a child is online, the more socially disengaged and isolated they become. This results often in diagnoses of conditions such as social anxiety and depression. As we plan for the next 2 to 3 years, we will now look at some recommendations. The first recommendation is to create an admissions process for the virtual school. While one can argue that all parents should have access to the TCDSB virtual school due to the fact that the school is offered by a public school board, a clear admissions process should still be outlined to overcome some of the challenges presented earlier. An admissions process should include the following. Firstly, a full and transparent presentation of the child's learning profile by the in-person school in collaboration with the parent who is fully informed as to what the virtual school is actually able to offer. Secondly, in the event of an admission of a special needs student, a meeting with the in-person school support staff needs to take place to discern whether the virtual school is the best placement option for the child. Lastly, where the student is new to the school board and the parent is requesting admission to the virtual school, a registration meeting with each parent and child take place to discuss the virtual school placement and what learning virtually entails. One of the main disruptors to virtual learning is parental interference in lessons. The advent of virtual learning, while the student is at home, has opened up the classroom to parents in a way they never had access before within in-person settings. While we continue to encourage parental involvement in the TCDSB, especially for students who are learning virtually, parental involvement cannot come at the expense of a degraded classroom learning experience. As a result, our second recommendation is to create a parental code of conduct for virtual learning settings. This code of conduct would need to stipulate 3 directions. Firstly, discouraging parent interruption. The code would need to outline that parents cannot interrupt classroom instruction and that their child may be muted or their child's account may be muted if this occurs. Creating a communication process. Outline a specific process where a parent can contact the teacher outside of synchronous learning time to ask questions and share concerns. Finally, the code would need to outline a conflict resolution process where there is a breakdown in parent and teacher communication. Our third and final recommendation is to create a process for children to return back to in-person school. Where students are experiencing challenges with virtual learning due to either a special need or due to social isolation, a process needs to be established to reintegrate a child back to an in-person setting. This process should include the following steps. Number 1, a conversation with the support staff of the virtual school needs to take place to identify the best placement for the child given the child's needs and circumstances. 2, a conversation with the parent to review the challenges faced by the child while learning online. 3, provide the parent with placement options and encourage a return to in-person learning. And 4, once an agreement is in place to integrate the child back to an in-person school, a meeting with the in-person school should take place to create and implement a transition plan. While the move to remote learning became a learning option as the capability of technology and access to technology improved, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic expedited the development of remote learning as a learning option in publicly funded school boards. PPM 164 outlines the requirements for school boards, and the TCDSB has made virtual learning a permanent staple for families and students. After 3 years in operation, some refinements are required to continue to ensure that virtual learning continues to be effective at supporting student learning needs for the years to come.